بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم ما أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع ذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون واتخذوا من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم قامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها هبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر والليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحتك الإثم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تثنيني من كربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك السؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني باسمك راضيا قانيا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعة. اللهم وأسألك السؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرة ولا لكبائي ساترة ولا لشيء من عملي الكبيه بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من كبير سترته وكم من فاض من البلاء أكلت وكم من إثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي السوء وحالي وكسرت بي أعمالي وكادت بي أغلالي وحبسني النفع بود عملي وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تواجهني بالعقوبة على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور يتوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأل كشف الضر والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت في هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أحوى وأسعد على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك والزمني حكمك وبلاءك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعتي من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك والسالف برك بي. يا إلهي والسيد وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد التوحيد وبعد ما انتوى علي قلبي من معرفتك ولهج بي لساني من ذكرك واعتقد ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتي. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك الساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك الصادق وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشية ولا جواري سات الأوطان تعبدك طائية وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثوه يسير بقاء كثير مدته فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي لأليم العذاب والشدة أم لطول البلاء ومدتي فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائي وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائي وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي والسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابي فكيف أصبر على فراقي وهبني يا إلهي صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفو فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني نعتك لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولو نادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاك طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أتباعها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج معمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل التوحيد ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبكى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك ورعفتك أم كيف تعلم النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يورك لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتكلكل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتكي منها فتترك فيها هيحات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت بالموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أكتو لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا والسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماء أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من علي أجريتها أن تحب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل كبير أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمت أو أعلنت أخفيت أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثبات الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بإبد ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أكفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي يا من بيدنا عاصيا يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك دعائك أن تجعل أوقات من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي وإرادتي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من علي معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جواره واشدد على العزيمة جوانه وحبلي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين واشتاق إلى كربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة المؤمنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بالسوء فاعرض ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقرب منزلة منك وخصم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي حبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتي واكلني أسرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت لعبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء والسلاه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهل وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على رحم الله من قرأ سورة مباركة الفاتحة.
محمد صلوات الله صل على आखिरी रात सकीना की आखिरी रात सकीना की हाय 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 मैं खाक पर सो जाऊंगी मैं खाक पर सो जाऊंगी हाँ कहती हूँ बाबा सीने पे सुलाने को कहाँ कहती हूँ बाबा कहती हूँ कि चेहरा ही देखा जाए बाबा मरने से मेरे पहले ही आ जाइए बाबा पहलू में छुपाने को कहाँ कहती हूँ बाबा बच्चे तो बहुत छोटे हुआ करते हैं बाबा हर एक मुसीबत पे गिला करते हैं बाबा मैं नाज़ उठाने को कहाँ कहती हूँ बाबा हाय बाबा बाबा मेरे बचपन का तकाज़ा तो नहीं था ख्वाबों में खिलौने थे जनाजा तो नहीं था गोदी में खिलाने को कहाँ कहती हूँ बाबा बाबा मेरे जख्मों की दवा कौन करेगा अब जान सकीना को भला कौन कहेगा पहलू में छुपाने को कहाँ कहती हूँ बाबा मैं खाक पर सो जाऊंगी हाँ कहती हूँ बाबा सीने पे सुलाने को कहाँ कहती हूँ बाबा हमद वाल मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम
Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, my respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for the marhumeen's names listed on the screen and all the marhumeen. Al-Fatiha. Dua Shafa Marriage is requested for the name listed on the screen and whoever is sick here and also around the world. Let's recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'ahu yakshifu su. 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 I would like to invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to come forward and recite tonight's lecture. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين. سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we begin tonight's discussion, inshallah, there was a question left over from our session about 2.5 weeks ago. So we want to go through this question first. After that, we'll go on to our main discussion, which will be a summary of what we've talked about before the month of Muharram up until Muharram Safar, ending up with Milad. And then maybe we'll foreshadow what we'll be talking about in the coming weeks. And inshallah, there'll be a quiz as usual. So if you can log in now, that way we don't waste time at the end and we can get right to it, inshallah. So, Bismillah. The questioner says, at the beginning of the discussion on women, you had said that there are usually two viewpoints presented. A more conservative approach, while the other one was influenced by modern ideas. How is the argument you presented, only at the forefront during a crisis of wilaya, different from the first approach? So this is a really good question, and I'm happy that the questioner, and hopefully others, were paying attention well enough that this kind of question came about. So this does show that people were analyzing these points, which is good. So let's just refresh what we were talking about here and refresh our memories. We said that in the discussion about women and women's roles in Islam. Normally, from the minbar, from the pulpit, there's two different approaches that are taken. One, which we termed a conservative or traditional approach, typically just focused on a few issues that we end up hearing a lot, right? About hijab and the importance of hijab for women, about woman's role as a mother or as a wife, something like that. They don't really go beyond that. That's pretty much how they enclose and restrict or constrict the role of women, just to those sort of factors. And we didn't say that this was wrong, we just said it's maybe slightly deficient or incomplete. It only gives us a part of the picture. Because we said that some others might say, well, if somebody, a woman doesn't get married, she doesn't have any children, for example, what then is her role? What is her responsibility towards God and towards humanity? And what should she be doing? This sort of approach, yeah, okay, the hijab part, fine, maybe that's still there. But as far as, emphasizing or the emphasis on the role of a mother and motherhood, or being a wife and a good spouse, all this, that's fine. But if she doesn't fill those roles, then it almost seems like a woman could respond, am I useless now in terms of my relationship with God because I'm not a wife and I'm not a mother? Well, what good am I in that sense? And you see that sometimes these individuals, the speakers who use this approach, they don't really have a good response for it. They might just make up something on their own that, you can do this, be involved in the community, etc. But they're not coming about it in a Islamically derived way. It's kind of their own opinion that, yeah, you can get involved and do this. On the other side, the other approach we saw was a modernist approach which relied heavily on modern Western feminism, right? Especially the newer waves, right? Because there's multiple waves of feminism, but especially the newer waves, which is very sort of anti-male, very pro-female, pro-woman. And this idea was that, no, women should be at the forefront of everything. Women should be active at all times. So the way that the questioner is putting it, it seems like they don't have an issue of seeing why this modern feminist notion is wrong. It seems like the questioner, and I think most of us understand why that's problematic, right? So perhaps where the confusion or the vague part of this might lie is this. The argument that we had offered was that our understanding of the conservative and traditional approach seems to limit women's interactions to just a few roles, and makes them seem like, if you don't do this, or even if you do this, you're seen as sort of a second-class Muslim, a second-class citizen, if you will. All right, this is what you're restricted to, so just do this, stay at home, and that's it. You don't go beyond that. And that's why you'll see, especially women who are born and raised here, they have an issue with that approach, because they don't really see, well, what exactly is my role with God then? What we tried to offer with this one is to give a Quranic and historical basis, a socio-political basis for what sort of activity should a woman do? What is the basis for why she should and should not be active? And that's why we talked about this idea of a crisis of wilaya. This is when, given a certain circumstance in society, in history, it might be prudent and it might be necessary for a woman to defend her wali, to defend her imam, to come out in the open. But when we look at history, we don't see that that is the norm. So the difference here in this approach is this. The conservative or traditional approach, they don't really have a basis for when should a woman come out or not. They don't really have a good reason for that. They haven't made a strong argument. This approach, however, was trying to give a reason for perhaps why is it that her role as a mother is so emphasized, a role as a wife is so emphasized, because it's one of the main battlefields of defending wilaya. Right? Because we said the main walis, the awliya that she'll be defending, or that she'll be supporting in her life, will be her father, right? Number one, when she's born. It'll be her husband. And then, as she'll, later on, inshallah, if they have children, then they'll be raising those children as well, to, if they're boys especially, to be future awliya, right? Walis of their house, or for the women, the daughters in that house, so that they can become supporters and defenders as well. And this is a responsibility that the males do not have. Allah has not given them this responsibility. This is something squarely put on the shoulders of women, of building up societies, building up the people who will defend the objective moral values of mankind, defending religion, and defending the people who are there out and doing the frontline work. So this was the sort of argument we tried to say. So the conservative traditional approach, again, we said we don't completely disagree with it, but there were just some deficiencies on how they can offer up arguments in this sense. What we tried to offer is a good, strong foundation or a basis. And we could have gone deeper, but we didn't want to go too much into the metaphysical and philosophical implications. We tried to just stick to some basic Quranic principles, right, that we found, for example, the sister of Musa, alayhi salam, right, we said, she said is Maryam. And we looked at the women from the time of the Prophet and the various Imams. So we wanted to give this sort of example to see how throughout time, within their households and outside in public, how they were defending wilaya. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So I hope that clarifies it. If not, then feel free to ask again, and then we'll either later tonight or in the next session we can try to continue and talk about it more in depth, inshallah. So let's go to now our topic. Before the month of Muharram and Safar, we had started a series which was about adopting an Islamic lifestyle, how to build and live an Islamic life. So within that, we had a few different subtopics and sub-discussions. So because this was a long time ago, and I'm sure none of you studied before you came here, so I want to summarize that tonight. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit more of some of the points we left off on that we didn't get to talk about. If not, then we'll talk about what we'll do for next week, inshallah. So the first thing we talked about was, well, what does it mean to have a lifestyle first? When we're talking about adopting an Islamic lifestyle, what do we mean? And we gave examples. That a lifestyle in general is a person's belief, and this belief system that they have drives every single thing that they do. I have these lenses, these glasses that I use. With these glasses, that's how I look out at reality. So, if somebody adopts a vegan or a vegetarian lifestyle, and that's their main defining point, their main identity, then everything that they do and say will be defined by that. Right? We gave this example. So when they go out to eat, they're going to choose where they go, obviously, based on them being a vegan. So they want a vegan meal. Or if they choose to, let's say, buy certain clothes, or go to certain stores, if their vegan or vegetarian identity is strong, then they might go to one where they know that these are not sourced from animals, animals were not abused in the making of these products, etc., right? Depending on their level of how much they want to do that. And in conversation as well. Most likely, and I'm sure if many of you have interacted with a vegan or a vegetarian, especially a very strong-willed, passionate one, they don't shy, they're not shy with their beliefs. They are very, very preachy, in that sense, right? So they'll say, how could you go and how could you kill animals, and you know that they're in pain when they go through all this. How could you sit there and do all this stuff? So, they're always preaching to try to get people to the other side. Which, as we talked about before, if somebody believes that this is the truth, that's what you'd want to do, obviously, right? You don't hide the truth to yourself. You want to come and explain it to everybody else and try to convert them, so to speak, to get them to your side. So that if you believe that what we do is harming animals, and we shouldn't be harming animals, then you're going to go around and try to convince everybody, hey, I'm somebody that believes that we shouldn't harm animals in the way that we buy things and the way that we eat, etc. So I'm going to convince you of the same thing, so hopefully you can join our side, right? Now our question was this: does it make sense to say that there is a such thing as an Islamic lifestyle? And the reason that this question comes about, especially nowadays, is because, and it's not just a issue related to Islam. This is happening and has happened to all religions, where over time, because of various movements, various ideas and deviant ideas that have crept in, people have moved away from relying on God completely to sort of, relegating and delegating God to just a few different things. So this is where we talked about the idea of part-time versus full-time religion, or part-time versus full-time Islam. We have many individuals, even so to speak, scholars who come on the pulpits and who talk about, look, let the scientists talk about their thing, let the experts in politics talk about their thing. God and religion, that's some stuff for your house, right? Private sphere. Just stick to that. You do your prayers, you fast, and read your holy book, and that's it. That's all you have to do. It shouldn't come out in the open. It's not meant for the public. Religion doesn't care about anything like that. Religion only cares about your soul on the day of judgment, that's it. It doesn't care about what happens in our society, in our world right now. So because these new sort of progressive, secular, liberal, humanist ideas have crept in everywhere, then it's caused many of us who've traditionally never held these beliefs, it's made us doubt. So first thing we asked is, how did these ideas come about? Why is it that traditionally throughout history, through polytheistic societies, through other religious societies, whether it's the Greeks, the Romans, traditional, let's say Hindu society, whatever, God or divinity was always seen as the way to describe what's going on in reality, and it was always the source of what is true and what is false. Always. Right? They would always look to, what do the gods say? Or what does God say? What does our deity say? That's it. And they would usually put their religious clerics at a special position because they'd say, look, we don't have access as lay people. You tell us what are the gods, or what is God saying, and you tell us, what is true and what is false. And that's how it was. So what we did then, our next sub-discussion was about the historical changes. So what we talked about was, especially we focused on the Middle Ages, especially European history. We went from what we call the Dark Middle Ages, as people slowly started to move away from religiosity and tried to find other reasons for how to explain what's going on in the world. And we mentioned the different factors, right? Because of the corruption that was going on in the church at that time, because they moved away from explaining things using religion, using metaphysics, using philosophy or mysticism, these traditional things that we always had in society. They moved away from that and slowly started to focus more on human rationality, on mathematics, on science, and say, we can use these things to describe it. Let's put religion and the scripture aside, and especially these clerics who have been oppressing us and abusing us. Then we shifted to the scientific revolution, where again, now the fight starts to develop between religion and science. Well, science says this about the center of the universe, but the scriptures say something else. Well, who do we trust? Well, more and more religious scientists were saying we have to trust science, not the scriptures. We have to throw those ideas out and go towards what science is telling us. Then we went forward towards the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment, they said, yeah, let's hold on to science, great, but our human intellect, our ability to rationally understand things, that can tell us what is right or wrong. So if, for example, it doesn't make sense to me, using what I call rationality or logic or reasoning, it doesn't make sense for me why God would put people in hell, then, let's toss that out of religion. So that's what they started to do. So they go forward. We went to the Industrial Revolution. As people started to use the human intellect, science, they developed all these wonderful innovations and inventions, and the scientific progression took place. Then they said, look, it's clear that religion wasn't giving us anything. With science and human rationality in our brains, we have all these wonderful devices and inventions. So we should focus more on this, right? So slowly they start to move away from God and go towards man's desires, what man and humans wanted. Then we came to the modern age, when they said, look, we have our intellects, we have science, there's no need for religion anymore. And that's when you start to see people like Marx, these atheistic movements become very, very powerful. And they start to say things that religion is just a product of human thinking. It's fake. It doesn't exist. It's just in our minds. There is no God. Na'udhu billah. We don't need some, fairy tales and myths to tell us how to live our life. Our minds and scientific studies and inquiry can tell us what is right and wrong and what is morally good and false. So it wasn't just that we don't need science. Then they moved forward and said, it wasn't just that we don't need religion. They said religion is actually detrimental to humans. It's destructive. We need to get rid of it altogether. As Marx said, religion is the opiate of the masses. Get rid of it. And we hear this now with famous atheists. It's not just that they say, if you want to believe or not, whatever, we can use science and logic. They say, no, we need to destroy and completely eliminate religion because it's backwards, it's barbaric, and people who believe in God and prophets and books, they're all stupid, they're dumb. And these backwards people are ruining society. So this is how far it's come, and that's where we are right now. And where we ended on in the historical discussion is where we are right now, which we call the postmodern age. In the postmodern age, they've gone beyond that. They said, look, science, that's made up. Our human logic can't tell us anything. Of course religion's fake. Do you know what is the real fake thing, or the real fake thing? What is the problem with society? It's that people think that there are true values, that people believe in truth, when in reality, there's no such thing as truth. There's no such thing as reality. So you get these strange philosophies like nihilism, or sometimes pronounced nihilism, right, of Friedrich Nietzsche, who some say he believed, or he's at least said God is dead, which there's an argument about whether he believed that or not. But khair, the society that we live in now is post-truth, post-modern. Believe whatever you want. Believe whatever your heart tells you. You define reality. You get to define what is true. And in our religious language, what does that mean? It means that your nafs, your carnal soul, gets to dictate what's going on. And if this is not exactly what shaitan wanted, then I don't know what is. This is exactly what the devil wants. For us to be able to live our life according to our own whims, our own desires, what we like. We don't know the difference between right and wrong, and we are constantly being pushed to what is wrong. But this is exactly what society is telling us 24/7. Whether it's in Hollywood, whether it's in TV shows, whether it's in music and popular culture, in these cliche, taboo slogans that we hear all the time, things printed on cards, all this stuff. All this movement is to, live your truth, or take care of yourself, be who you are. All these kind of ideas are basically devilish, satanic, shaitani movements in disguise, trying to push people to just live like an animal, live the worst version of themselves. And you can't say that they're wrong, because they say, look, there's no such thing as truth. I define what is true. This is how bad society has gotten right now. And some people, as we've talked about before, even religious people, haven't recognized how bad society has gotten. So we said that there's two different trends going on right now. One has moved towards this, meaning forget reality, forget truth, I'm going to do whatever I want. But the other individuals, whether they were previously religious or not, have realized this is complete chaos. This is nonsense. We need to finally go back to religion. We need to go back to a traditional society, a pre-modern version of society. We need to find out what is objective truth. And many individuals who were previously atheists or worshiping science or worshiping their own intellect finally realized we need God. We need religion. We need revelation. We need scriptures. We need something outside of the human being, because we can't agree on what's going on. And if everybody else is telling us just to act on whatever we want, then we're just going to end up destroying ourselves. So realizing that this is not a stable ideology, they finally, thank God, alhamdulillah, went back to religion. And slowly we see those two trends happening. We see a large group, a large increase in atheism or skepticism or denial of religion and God and metaphysics and the immaterial nature of human beings and reality. But at the same time, we do see people being reborn and coming back towards religion as well. So this is pretty much where we had ended off in the historical discussion. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We then had a short discussion about, well, what about the Islamic world? So this was all about, the Western society, specifically Europe, and then what we're dealing with right now in the West. And some places now in the Islamic world, in the Middle East, unfortunately, have also been infected by this very disastrous ideology, this virus, right? Some would even argue even more deadly than COVID. Because people, at least most people, recognize that there is COVID and people can get sick and we have to protect ourselves, etc. But when you try to explain to somebody that there is a spiritual contagious disease going around the world, trying to get people away from God and towards their carnal desires, that's nonsense, right? There's no devil, we can believe whatever we want, don't be so strict, don't be so backwards. People don't recognize that there is a spiritual disease, not just infecting Muslims, but infecting anybody, infecting everybody, whether they practice or not. And it's sad sometimes when religious people, God-fearing people, Muslims, Christians, Jews, whoever, they are also infected by this idea, and they repeat and regurgitate the slogans of people who are trying to push society away from going back towards God and being God-fearing and God-conscious. In the Islamic world, we first talked about, was there ever this clash of religion and science? And we said, no. Initially there wasn't, because the scholars were always masters of all trades. So they would understand the empirical sciences, the science of logic, right, mantiq. They would also be experts in metaphysics and philosophy, in Quranic studies, in traditional narrative studies. So they always took everything and make sure they realized, how does this connect back to God? They never divorced these ideas from God, which was a different trend which took place then, what happened in Europe, and what's happening right now, when people are trying to separate these ideas from the scriptures or from God. What happened is, over time, new deviated ideas came about, which pushed people away from scriptures, from God, from Islam, from Christianity, Judaism, whatever. And they said, let's focus on that. So specifically, this did happen in the Muslim world, where they said, Islam does not address everything. Islam, Quran, the Ahadith, the Imams do not have all the answers. So then this fight came about. We talked about the different responses that Muslim scholars gave to this sort of progressive, secular, minimalistic version of Islam. I'm not going to repeat those. There was Quranic verses where Allah says, I perfected religion on this day, or that everything has been explained in the Quran, right? Tibyan li kulli shay. This has been mentioned in the Quran. So these were the traditional arguments. There was rational arguments too, that if God is God as the creator of our soul, the one who's looking over our society, our nurturer, maintainer, if he knows that food, drink, politics, engineering, whatever you want to talk about, if these can and will have an effect on our soul, which they obviously do, then if God is the one who's in charge of that, he's the one who made our soul and the one who's supposed to be guiding us, then he must have given rules and recommendations for all of these things too. So there should be a divine nutritional system as well. There should be some recommendations about how to stay physically fit. There should be some idea about how to create, let's say, a religious or a God-fearing society. These things have to be mentioned. And these things are mentioned, obviously, right? So this is where we went to the idea of the philosophers who talked about this idea of the virtuous city, the Madinatul Fadila, right? Which is an idea that Farabi, this great philosopher, had talked about. He said, if you want to build a perfect society, a perfect city, you need a perfect human. And he said, this is why God sends down perfect individuals in the shape of prophets and imams, specifically with our holy prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So the only way you can get a truly perfect, utopian, virtuous city is if you have a perfect, virtuous leader. And this is why you see Allah, God, is sending down prophet after prophet, saying that, look, mankind, humans, let this person run your society, and then you won't have all these issues. Whether they're physical issues, medical issues, spiritual issues, they won't happen. They won't take place. Then we talked about why is it that now Muslims are being affected by, the secularist trend or humanistic trend or liberal trend, whatever it is. We said that, one, we talked about some of our own scholars, unfortunately, are victims of this, so that they infect our, general public. But the idea is that some of those scholars have never studied this history of how religion has been adulterated and abused and transformed over time. They never studied that. So they think that, yes, I can understand what God is saying through science and my own mind. So they start forcing their own ideas onto the Quran and to the narrations. And if something doesn't agree with them, they'll toss it out. If they say, look, hijab was great 1400 years ago for modesty, but right now it doesn't make sense, my mind tells me. Or I have some scientific evidence, so let's toss that whole idea aside. Right? That's what some of these modernists will do. So that's where they come and start changing the religion of God with these sort of, reason-based arguments or scientific-based arguments. So this is where I want to sort of end. I want to talk about the three different approaches, one I just mentioned, but three different approaches right now that all of us will find with any sort of religious scholar, but particularly within Muslim scholars as well. If you can recite another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, how would somebody determine whether religion should be part-time or full-time? Or how do they determine what is true and real and what is really religious and Islamic or not? Well, the first one is what sometimes, the first approach, what individuals unfortunately call fundamentalist. Right? A fundamentalist approach, an extreme approach, a conservative approach, a traditional approach. And what do they say? They say, look, we need to rely on the Quran and the Sunnah. What What does the Quran say? And what do the Ma'asumin alayhimussalam say? We take that and then we can tell you what is right and wrong. We can tell you what is true and false. We can tell you whether something happened historically or not. The lens we need to look at for reality is told by the Quran and a hadith. That's the only lens that we need. We don't need anything else. Forget science, forget your intellect, put that stuff aside. So they will completely dismiss anything that your mind will tell you, anything that logic dictates, and anything that science would say. So let me give one example. If there are verses of the Quran that say, Yadullah, the hand of God, say, look, take your mind away from the discussion. God is saying that God has a hand. He's saying himself in the Quran that I have a hand, so therefore God must have a hand. We might not understand what that means, but God has to have a hand. Now, of course, to a lot of us that sounds ridiculous, right? How could God have a hand, right? It's a physical thing. But for these sort of, again, I use the word fundamentalist because that's how people charge them, or conservative traditional, but the idea is they don't want to move beyond the scriptures, the literal text. They want to stick to that. They don't want to use logic and reasoning, their minds at all, and they don't want to use science. In some places they might be right, but in certain issues we'd say, well, there might be a problem with using that idea. So one other kind of modern discussion where we can see whether this is an issue is in medical discussions. If right now, unfortunately, many people have been getting in trouble because they have claimed that we have a cure to COVID and it's found in the Quran or found in the narrations. And they're going and they're advising people in communities to take so-and-so drug or so-and-so mixture of vinegar and honey and black seed, whatever it is, right? I forgot what they say. So if you do this, you'll be cured. Now, one problem, of course, is that a lot of these discussions themselves, these narrations are inauthentic. But even if they were authentic, there is a huge discussion on whether these things can be relied upon for, new sort of ideas like COVID or whatever it is. And unfortunately, they're not taking into consideration the sort of new scientific discoveries which would address these sort of issues. So this sort of approach, although in some parts it might work, we see, generally speaking, in this world, it's not the strongest approach. So now we go on to the second sort of extreme approach, which is what we call these minimalists, these progressives or liberals or whatever you want to call them, or intellectuals, as they like to say, forward-thinking people who say that, look, religion is only about spirituality, it's only talking about your soul, it's only dealing with the day of judgment, the hereafter. So it's only about what's your relationship with God. How do you pray? How do you fast? Read your scriptures. Be a good person, that's it. Don't overcomplicate things with all these, rules and numbers and, that's not religion. Don't be so extreme. Don't get so strict. Right? You hear these words, I'm sure, a lot. So they say, religion has nothing to say about the physical world. Nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with science, nothing to do with history, nothing to do with engineering or chemistry, none of these things. In economics, none of that stuff. Be a good person, that's it. This is the minimalist or sort of progressive version of a religious or Islamic approach. And this also is going to have an issue. Why? Because it's clear in the Quran and in the narrations, constantly we're being told that you can eat this and you can't eat that. This is, we have rules in the Quran and Hadith about, charging interest and not charging interest. So it's clear that God, knowing that these things are going to affect society, affect our spirituality, He's mentioned these rules. So how can these individuals completely discount all these ideas? Where in the Quran and the Hadith does it say that you can use your mind and science to change all of God's rules? That doesn't exist. So they've gone, unfortunately, beyond their means, beyond what God and the Scripture have said, and they now, unfortunately, in many parts are following their own whims, their own desires, and their own ideas. They're not following what God has dictated. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this is the second approach. And then we have what we'd call the synthetic approach or more moderate approach, whatever you want to use, which is that, look, science has its place. Rationality, logic, and reasoning, that has its place too. All these other systems and functions and approaches that we have, they can be used. But you have to know where is the right time and the right place. When we have something clear in scriptures, in the Quran, in the Hadith, it might not be the best time to start invoking science and religion, and science and logic. But these are the types of things that our scholars do discuss, and if people are interested, then you have to get involved in research. It's not enough for somebody just to come and say, oh, NASA's figured out moon sighting, so we all need to do Eid on the same day. No. You don't get to just think about it for 10 seconds and then come up with a fatwa. That's not how this works. If you are interested in why or why not we shouldn't be using, let's say, NASA astronomical calculations for moon sighting, well, okay. There are pages and pages and pages and books and volumes of discussions on what is an authority about moon sighting. There are narrations, Quranic verses, scientific discussions, logical discussions. Feel free to jump in. But that's going to require time. It's going to require patience. You're going to have to read something. You can't just sit around at your computer, think about it for 10 seconds and all of a sudden, oh, I had an epiphany and I can start passing fatwas. It doesn't work like that. As we talked about before, no science, no discipline works like that. That we can just sit in our chairs comfortably and just make up our own ideas. Why would we say the same thing for religion, right? So it shouldn't apply like that as well. We do apply our own rationality. That's how we've proven that God exists, through our rational, reasoning. We've given rational proofs for why the Quran is the final word of God. Why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last and final prophet of God. We have rational proofs for all of these things, as well as historical ideas and socio-political. We have various ideas for that. In terms of some places, we can also invoke scientific principles, to help us out. Now, does science become our religion? No. Can it be an aid at some points? Sure, why not? Right? But if we know the actual science, not just some random WhatsApp forward that talks about, again, I don't want to go into details, but you all know. You were in these WhatsApp groups, you've seen on social media how these things get forwarded, and they're, debunked or nonsense science. So if you really want to see the scientific quote-unquote studies which prove religious ideas, then you're also going to have to spend time researching those things as well. So this is where I wanted to end today. I just wanted to leave it there. Next week, inshallah, we'll have 2 sessions on Wednesday night as we celebrate the wilada of the 11th Imam alayhi salam, and then we'll have our usual Thursday night. So because it'll fall around the time of Thanksgiving, I think that we'll probably spend those 2 nights talking about the concept of shukr and gratitude. Now, as far as after that, what are we going to do for our upcoming Thursday nights? So this discussion of adopting an Islamic lifestyle, it's one possibility. We could continue this. I've had people come up with other suggestions. So if anybody has any of their own suggestions, feel free to let me know. I might decide to put up a poll next week, on Slido. So maybe we'll do that as well. But feel free to message me, talk to me afterwards, and maybe we can talk about what's maybe a topic that you want to go through as a series on Thursday nights. Whether it's a commentary on a specific dua, or on a ziyarah, or on Nahjul Balagha, or going through the tafsir or commentary on some ahadith, maybe we can do something like that. Maybe a historical discussion, focusing on akhlaq. Think about it, and then you can share your feedback with me, inshallah. So with that, we'll jump to see if there's any questions on Slido. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, so I guess there's nothing on Slido, so then we'll jump right into the quiz then, right? Yeah, Hasan, okay. So, assalamu alaikum to everybody. Muzammil, Jafar, Muhammad, the true Gnostic, Hasan, the specialist, AMH, Aristotle, and Anonymous. So we've got 9 people. I think I don't want to go over time, so let's just get started and hopefully everybody else can join. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, the 6th Imam alayhi salam has said that salah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is blank, from the angels is blank, and from humans is blank. So this was talking about a narration attributed to the 6th Imam. That the meaning of salah is different from everything. When salah is from Allah, what does it mean? From the angels, what does it mean? And from humans, what does it mean? Hopefully some of you have realized that this question should be familiar to you. Okay, so Rahma, Tazkiyah, and Dua. Ahsant, very good. So 58% of you, 33% of the above. Okay, well, let's see how we do for the rest of the questions. The verse of salawat, right? The verse of salawat. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. Which chapter and which verse is it found? chapter 14, verse 14, chapter 5, verse 14, chapter 33, verse 33, or none of the above. Again, this should be very, very familiar to you, hopefully. I'm sure some of you already have picked up on the pattern as well. So I've got high expectations for everybody today. Let's see what happens. Oh boy. 50% said 33:33. That is Ayatul Tathir. The ayat of salawat is 33:56. 33:56. Oh boy. I'm going to be disappointed again, it seems, huh? Okay, let's go to the third one. Salawat, the word salawat, comes from the word salah, which means what? Daily prayer, dua, meaning supplication, mercy and purification, or all of the above. You have to vote on your phone. I'm not sure. Oh, okay, let's see. 73% said all of the above. Alhamdulillah. Okay. 73% is not bad, right? It is all of the above, right? Salah obviously means our daily canonical prayer. Generally speaking, it can mean any sort of dua, anything that you ask of God. As we just answered in the other question, salah from God is a mercy, and from the angels is tazkiyah, purification. So it was all of the above. Okay. Last question, please. Please. This is the toughest one, but I've reworded it, so hopefully it'll become easier. But yeah, this is the toughest one. Salute, right? To salute comes from the Latin sol and salvus. What does salvus mean? Is it to raise one's hand to one's head? Is it to show respect and be polite? Is it to be safe, wholesome, and preserved? Or all of the above? Let's see. Let's see. So I'm going to lower my expectations for this one because I had high expectations before and you guys have been letting me down, although the last one was good, but let's see. All of these were the questions from last. Oh my. Ay khuda. Salvus itself means safe, wholesome, and preserved, right? To be all together. We said salute, like the physical salute is that, or it can also mean to show respect and be polite, which is sol and I don't know what to say. It's okay. I mean, that one was, it's a random factoid. It's not a big deal. Let's see if anybody got all four correct. Let's see. Some people did last time, but let's see who we got this time. Oh, okay, I can't see the result on mine. So number one is what, ST? I can't write. I don't know, it doesn't show up on when I do the thing over here. Good. Congratulations to at least two of you, ST and I think the specialists. I don't know, if I'm put this quiz up again next week, I don't know what's going to happen. If we're going to have the same result or not. But inshallah, we'll continue with our sessions next week. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Bayt Tayyibin Tahirin. Wa salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا وذليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله
السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلت ولعن الله أمة ظلمت ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة. لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مذلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرذي الزكي الحادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وآلام الهدى والأروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن بشراء ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلت ولعن الله أمة ظلمت ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله ووداء. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناسب. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليكم يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأخوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله وليقيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلت ولعن الله أمة ظلمت ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعته الراغب فيما زيد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان سيدي الأمان الأمان من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.